Yo, what's up everybody? It's Manga Mike here, and we're back with yet another video. So, in today's video, I'm going to be doing a review of Araki's book, Manga in Theory and Practice. So, I did talk about this book last week in my last video when I went over Kisho Tenketsu. So, I'm going to be skipping over a few things in here, but overall, in this review, I'm going to be going over what's in the book, what sets this book apart from others, and that's including my takeaways from it, and then my overall grade for the book / if you should buy it or not. Alright, let's get started. Alrighty, so first I wanted to talk about just the general overview of what's in the book, just so you know. So it has a discussion of the 4 fundamentals and why they're important, and then it goes into an in-depth analysis of each one. So it has designing characters. So the design isn't just a look, right? It's the backstory of the character, blood type, family of origin, what things they like, things along those lines, the personality of a character, relationships with other characters, all of those questions, and he actually provides templates throughout to kind of show you his own thought process and when he's developing his characters. He then goes into specific portions in which he actually talks about JoJo's in particular and how he creates kind of the stand for his JoJo's characters before he even goes into designing the actual characters themselves. He even talks about how the magic systems kind of should mesh with the character design in total. So I think the biggest takeaway from this particular piece is that design is more than just what the character looks like, it's the character's personality and everything like that. So the next section that he does is writing a story. I'm not going to go into depth about what's actually in this section or any of the sections, because I do think that if you are interested, you can either do the research or you can get the book. But in writing a story, he talks about the Kisho Tenketsu method, which I have an entire video on from last week if you want to check that out. It's a very effective method that's used in Japan and in manga in general, and it's a very great method when you want to reach out specifically to teenage boys, or even probably girls as well. He gives examples through his own one-shots, shows what's important as far as character arcs are concerned. He has a general overview of like the audience that you may or may not want to be trying to connect with your story. He also gives bad examples of stories and why they don't necessarily work, and talks about just overall the general arcs of stories and how to make things work for your comic or your manga. The next thing that he goes into is something called art expression. So this is more of kind of my takeaways, which I'll get to in a bit, but he talks about why art matters and more and less than what you might think. He talks about like consistency, talks about realism and signification a little bit, and it's really kind of, he uses those things throughout this particular chapter to kind of highlight some of the things that you should be thinking about as you're designing characters and creating panels and things of that nature. And then the next part and the final fundamental is setting. And he talks a lot about why setting is really overlooked in manga, because it's an opportunity to kind of immerse your readers, and every time you get your setting wrong, you're actually doing a disservice to your manga because it's pulling readers away from that feeling of immersion. So he gives a really good example of how he failed at this. And it might seem really simple and arbitrary to us, but it was in fact important because he was getting letters and things from fans that were reading his one-shot. I believe it was a one-shot. And the example was he made a scene on a particular train track, and the errors that he made were that he made it so that the train track had 2 like train lines going through, and he also made the train track electric, and it wasn't. It had 1 line going through, and it was not an electric train track. I think it was like steam engine or something along those lines. So And in doing that, he got a lot of flack from some of his readers, and in his estimation, he probably lost a lot of readers because of those mistakes. So he talks about how you create a setting and the research that should go into creating those settings. He even goes as far as to say with some things, like you need to go and actually visit the setting. You can do all the research that you want to, but doing a Google search on Italy isn't going to give you a true Italian experience, so you might want to go visit. Now, obviously, that's coming from a very privileged point of view, right? We all don't have the wherewithal to be able to just pack up and go to Italy to be able to create a story, but it does show you a little bit of what is important and how to go about doing things in a professional manner, right? It can't just be haphazardly thrown together and expect to succeed, because settings are extraordinarily important, as I said earlier, for the immersion of your manga. And then the final thing that he kind of talks about is just theme. So he discusses theme as the foundation of creating an ongoing series. It's basically like an understanding of yourself and the things that are important with you in your own life, and how you can make a story based upon that. And this is important for two reasons. One, you have to create a story that you yourself can relate to, because if you don't, you yourself aren't going to be able to continue to push the story along. And then the next thing is, it keeps people coming back, right? There's something about the book that resonates with them, or the series, I should say, that resonates with them, and it's going to kind of push them to continue coming and reading chapter after chapter. And when you don't have those things, so he gives a great example. I really enjoy this, because it's kind of the thought process that we go through as creators at times. You can probably look and find the things that make manga popular and kind of do that kind of research and just push forward a manga that you know will be successful, just because it has the common tropes and things like that you see in the current successful mangas. But the problem with that is, at some point, it's like a light that just kind of busts out, right? Or a fire that kind of just dies out after a while. It's going to have good traction at first, but because you don't necessarily believe in the themes of that manga, at some point you're going to lose yourself in it, and you're also going to lose your readers. So those are kind of the examples that he gives on that, and I really enjoyed reading that, because it kind of sparks you to think hey, I need to actually write something that I like, and sometimes we forget that as creators. And then the final thing is that he does give examples of how to implement all of these things throughout his book. So he has examples, and I've kind of touched upon this, but he has examples from his own books. He has examples from other books. He talks in the designing characters. He brings up Dragon Ball and stuff like that, which is pretty cool to see. And in the writing a story, he uses his own one-shots throughout. He even talks about some of the parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventures and things like that. He talks about even his failures too, which I thought was really cool. And then in the art expression, he gives actual examples of pages and things and panels that he creates and the process that he goes through. And I already kind of gave the examples through setting and in theme as well. So that's kind of the overview of the book. And now I'm going to kind of go into this next piece, which I think is probably the more important piece. Let's get started on that. Alrighty, so I want to talk about what makes this book really special. So if you are smart, what you could do is you could go through all of these kinds of books, just look at the table of contents and kind of jot down the topics that they're talking about and do your own research, right? But I would argue if you do that, you miss the point of these kinds of books, because all of these books have a very similar structure with them, right? They talk about very similar things, but the thing that you would be missing is the subtle hints at what it takes to become a mangaka, for instance. Windows of thought within the mind of a mangaka. The dedication that comes with pursuing this road and doing it for the right reasons, right? So there's a lot within this book, and I'm not going to go over all of it because one, I don't think that's appropriate, but two, I think that you should experience it yourself. That was something that was so striking to me. The vulnerability of talking about, hey, when I did this particular one-shot, these were the things that I was really, really missing. And currently, these are the things that I'm still missing within my own comics and my own manga and JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, and how I can continuously improve upon my craft, right? And this is coming from somebody who's had over 20 years of success. So it really puts into shape what it's going to really take for us to succeed and to break through that barrier, because one, a lot of us aren't able to, dedicate our entire lives to just this process right now. And two, even when you do, this is the next level, even beyond professionalism, that you have to kind of make for yourself in order to have sustained success. So I'm going to show you in just a second one of the quotes that kind of exemplifies this just a little bit, and then I'll go into my final verdict of the book and whether or not I feel like you should buy it. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and read this particular passage that I think really shows what I'm talking about with the small tidbits. So it says, "Even when I think to myself, I really made something great this time, I make myself forget that feeling. I believe that if I let myself feel that I've created a masterpiece, I'll stop getting ideas to create anything else. For that same reason, whenever others compliment me, I never take it to heart. Only children grow through praise." So, while I might not agree with the totality of this particular statement, I do think it's important to show, because I feel that it shows the mindset of a mangaka, right? A professional one that's extraordinarily successful. You don't become successful by becoming complacent, right? You become successful by continuously challenging yourself to do better. Every single panel, you should be challenging yourself to make it better than the last. And that's really at the heart of what this statement is. Now, the piece that I don't necessarily agree with is whenever you get a compliment, you shouldn't take it to heart and only children grow through praise. I think that if you're too hard on yourself and you don't look and kind of praise yourself and accept some kind of praise, you're just kind of putting yourself through misery. So while I do understand what he's trying to say, and I don't know if this is like a translation thing or if it's actually his mindset, I don't necessarily wholeheartedly agree with it, but I do get the essence, right? You shouldn't only be driven in your work by compliments, because sometimes the compliments aren't going to be there, and that's especially true for when you're first starting. So learn to have that intrinsic value, that intrinsic belief system within you, where if something is going not so great, you still believe in the process that you're going through. So now we're going to just go ahead and go into my general review and my rating of this particular book and whether or not I feel like you should get it. Alrighty, so what is my final verdict? My final verdict is a 10 out of 10. I love this book, and the reason why I'm giving it a 10 out of 10 is because of the previous section that we just kind of went over. I think that this book excels in some of the subtle implications of what it takes to become a professional mangaka, especially if you want to do serialized manga. So I think that people misconstrue good information with meaning that it's a good book or a good piece of something, right? You can probably find all of these kinds of details and that the first section that I had of this where it's like the table of contents and looking through and seeing oh, these are the things that they cover. I'm sure that Araki's not the only person that's gone over the exact topics that's within this book, right? So the information at that point just becomes it's just the standard, right? You pick up a book like this, the standard is that the book's information is going to be what it takes to kind of help you go along the right path. So then, if that's the standard, what makes a book better? How does it make it a better version of something that's been done a billion times? And that is the last part that I talked about, which is the subtle implications of what it takes to actually succeed given the information that you've got. And that's what this book is. It's a spattering of all of his professional experiences, how he persevered through them. When he hits roadblocks, what does he do in order to kind of, rise above that obstacle? And there's just so much of that in here, and with the price tag on Kindle, which is what I bought it on, of like $11 or $10 or something like that, it's just like you can't beat it. And especially coming from somebody that's been in the industry this long, right? 20 plus years of creating manga is a very long time, and doing it very successfully at that. So I highly recommend this book if you're a comic or manga artist and you want to make it big, or if you want to just be able to create a coherent story. I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't read through this book. There's just so much good information. Alrighty, well, I hope that this review was helpful. As you can tell, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm really happy just to put this review up on my channel. And I do hope that it helps kind of influence some of you who are kind of on the fence about it. I think it's fantastic, and it's well worth your time. Alright, I'll be back with a video next week, but until then, I'm Manga Mike, and I'm out.